The humid Hong Kong night pulsed with a neon heartbeat. Rain slicked the narrow alleyway, reflecting the garish glow of a karaoke bar sign. Sunja, her shift at the small noodle stall finally over, hurried through the downpour, the scent of fish broth clinging stubbornly to her clothes. Her worn canvas sneakers squelched on the wet pavement. Ahead, a figure slumped against overflowing dumpster, a crumpled suit and disheveled hair betraying his affluent origins. He groaned, a low, guttural sound that pierced the rhythmic drumming of the rain. Sunja hesitated. Hong Kong had taught her caution. Mind your own business, that her grandmother's voice echoed in her ears. Kindness given is never wasted. Taking a deep breath, she approached cautiously. The man's face, partially obscured by shadow, was contorted in discomfort. Recognition flickered in Sonja's mind. It was Mr. Liu, one of the senior executives at the prestigious Cheng Holdings, where her cousin, MEI, worked as a receptionist. He'd visited the noodle stall a few times, always impeccably dressed, his demeanor aloof and intimidating. Now, he looked utterly vulnerable. "Mr. Liu," she asked tentatively. He stirred, his eyes fluttering open. They were bloodshot and unfocused. "Who?" he mumbled, his voice thick with alcohol. "It's Sanja," she said, her voice soft, from the noodle stall. "Do you need help?" He blinked, trying to focus. A wave of nausea washed over him, and he retched, the acrid smell of expensive whiskey mingling with the rain. Sanja instinctively recalled, but then, seeing his distress, she stepped forward and steadied him. "Come on, Mr. Liu," she said gently. "Let's get you out of the rain." She struggled to support his weight as she guided him towards the main street. He leaned heavily on her, murmuring incoherently. The rain plastered his hair to his forehead, and his expensive suit was soaked through. Sunja, despite her slender frame, felt a surge of unexpected strength. She had always been the caretaker, the responsible one, looking after her younger siblings and ailing grandmother. Finally, she managed to hail a taxi. Maneuvering him inside was a Herculean task, but with a combination of coaxing and sheer willpower, she succeeded. She gave the driver the address of Cheng Holdings, hoping it was the right thing to do. Throughout the journey, Mr. Liu remained slumped against her, his breathing shallow. Sunja felt a strange mix of concern and resentment. This man, who exuded such power and authority in his usual environment, was now utterly dependent on her, a lowly noodle stall worker. When they reached the gleaming skyscraper that housed Cheng Holdings, the security guards eyed her with suspicion. Sunja explained the situation, her voice trembling slightly under their scrutiny. They reluctantly allowed her to bring Mr. Liu inside. The opulent lobby, with its marble floors and soaring ceilings, felt like a different world from the cramped alleyway where she had found him. She guided him towards the elevators, her arm aching under his weight. Just as the doors were about to close, a sharp voice cut through the air. "What do you think you're doing?" It was MEI, her cousin, her face a mask of disbelief and anger. She rushed towards them, her high heels clicking on the polished floor. "MEI, it's Mr. Liu," Sonja explained, her voice strained. "He was unwell. I found him in an alleyway." May's eyes narrowed, assessing the situation. Then, a calculating glint appeared in them. She stepped between Sonja and Mr. Liu, pushing Sonja aside. "I'll take care of him from here," she said coldly. "You can go." Sonja felt a pang of hurt. She had only tried to help, and now she was being treated like an intruder. Mr. Liu stirred, his eyes flickering open again. He looked at Sonja, then at MEI, his gaze still clouded with confusion. "You," he mumbled, pointing a shaky finger at Sonja. "You took advantage of me." Sonja's breath caught in her throat. The accusation hung in the air, sharp and venomous. May's lips curled into a smug smile. The security guards exchanged knowing glances. I didn't, Sonja stammered, her cheeks burning with shame. I was just trying to help, mister. Lee shook his head, his voice gaining strength, fueled by a drunken anger. Liar. You tried to seduce me. Sonja felt a wave of nausea wash over her. She had never felt so humiliated, so unjustly accused. The opulent lobby, a symbol of wealth and power, suddenly felt like a prison. Get out, Emmy, I hissed, her voice dripping with contempt. Before I call security, Sonja's eyes welled with tears. She looked at Mr. Liu, his face contorted in disgust, and then at Emmy, her expression triumphant. She realized she was trapped, caught in a web of lies and deceit that she couldn't comprehend. Without a word, she turned and fled, the weight of the false accusation crushing her spirit. The rain, still falling outside, felt like a cleansing balm against the burning injustice she had just experienced. The air in the cramped apartment hung thick with the cloying scent of jasmine incense and desperation. Sonja sat rigidly on the worn floral sofa, the faded fabric clinging uncomfortably to her bare arms. Her mother, Emmy, paced before her, a whirlwind of nervous energy in a too-tight silk dress that shimmered under the harsh fluorescent kitchen light. He's a good man, Sonja. A businessman. Emmy emphasized the word as if it held the key to all their problems. He owns 3 restaurants, all successful. Think of it. No more instant noodles. No more worrying about the electricity bill. Sonja stared at her hands. The chip pink nail polish a stark reminder of her meager existence. Jin. The name felt heavy, suffocating. He was a man old enough to be her father, with a greasy smile and eyes that lingered a little too long. She'd met him only once, during a hurried, uncomfortable dinner orchestrated by her mother, and the memory still sent a shiver of revulsion down her spine. Mama, I told you I don't want to marry him, Sonja said, her voice barely above a whisper. Emmy stopped pacing and planted herself before Sonja, her hands on her hips. The scent of jasmine intensified, almost acrid. Don't be foolish. This is our chance, Sonja, our only chance. Do you think money grows on trees? Do you think I enjoy scrubbing floors for those rich high-ties? This marriage will solve all our problems. But Mama, I barely know him. May's face softened, the hard lines around her mouth momentarily relaxing. She knelt beside Sonja and took her hand, her touch surprisingly gentle. I know, daughter, but sometimes in life, we have to make sacrifices. This is for our family, for a better future. The weight of her mother's words pressed down on Sonja, crushing her beneath a mountain of obligation. She thought of the leaky roof, the ever-growing pile of unpaid bills, the constant worrying etched on her mother's face. She thought of her younger brother, still in school, his future hanging precariously in the balance. He touched me, Sonja confessed, the words a choked whisper. She hadn't told anyone about the incident at the restaurant, the way Jin's hand had brushed against her thigh, the unsettling gleam in his eye. May's face hardened again, the fleeting tenderness replaced by a steely resolve. Men are men, Sonja, you'll learn to manage. Besides, once you're married, he'll provide for us. That's what matters, Sonja recalled, pulling her hand away. The jasmine incense suddenly felt suffocating, a physical manifestation of her trapped existence. She wanted to scream, to run, to disappear. But where could she go? She had no money, no education, no prospects. Her life, it seemed, was not her own. He expects an answer tomorrow, Emmy said, a voice brisk and businesslike. I told him you'd agree. Sonja felt a wave of nausea wash over her. Tomorrow. The word echoed in her mind, a death knell to her freedom. She closed her eyes, trying to block out the reality of her situation. The image of Liu Chishan flashed through her mind, a stark contrast to the oily presence of Jin. His kindness, his gentle touch, the way he'd looked at her, it was a fleeting memory, a phantom limb of a life she could never have. He'd believed the lies, hadn't he? He'd thought she was just another gold digger, trying to trap him with a fabricated pregnancy. The humiliation burned fresh in her chest, a searing reminder of her place in the world. A nobody, a pawn in her family's desperate game of survival. Sonja. May's voice cut through her thoughts. Did you hear me? Sonja opened her eyes, the fluorescent light stinging. She looked at her mother, the lines of worrying etched deep into her face, the desperation shimmering in her eyes. She saw the years of hardship, the constant struggle to make ends meet, the crushing weight of poverty. And in that moment, Sonja understood. Her mother wasn't cruel, just desperate. Yes, Mama, she said, her voice hollow. I heard you. Resignation settled over her like a shroud. She was trapped, caught in a web of circumstance she couldn't escape. The thought of Jin, his touch, his expectations, filled her with dread. But she had no choice. She had to sacrifice her own happiness for the sake of her family. May's face relaxed, a flicker of relief replacing the anxiety. She reached out and touched Sonja's cheek, her touch now tinged with something akin to guilt. It will be all right, daughter, she whispered, you'll see. It will all be all right. Sonja closed her eyes again, letting the darkness swallow her whole. She knew it wouldn't be all right, but she had no fight left in her. All she had was the hollow ache of surrender. The jasmine incense hung heavy in the air, a fragrant tomb for her buried dreams. Tomorrow, she would become Mrs. Jin. Tomorrow, her life would truly begin. But not in the way she'd ever imagined. It would be a life built on sacrifice, a life shrouded in shadows, a life where love and happiness were luxuries she could no longer afford. The sterile white walls of the clinic reflected the fluorescent lights, casting a cool, impersonal glow on Sonja's anxious face. She clutched the forged consent form, her brother's name scrawled across it in her shaky handwriting. It felt like a betrayal, a lie built on desperation, but every other avenue had been blocked, every other escape route sealed. Marriage to Mr. Choi, a man old enough to be her father, was a fate she wouldn't accept. This procedure, this small act of rebellion, was her only shield. Sonja Petrovic. The nurse's voice, crisp and professional, cut through the tense silence. Sonja jumped, her heart hammering against her ribs. She smoothed down the wrinkles on her borrowed blouse, a pale imitation of the confident attire she'd worn while working as a cleaner at Liu Chishan's company. That world, that brief glimpse into a life beyond her family's suffocating poverty, felt a million miles away now. Yes, she managed, her voice a mere whisper. She followed the nurse into the examination room, the antiseptic smell clinging to the air like a shroud. As she sat on the crinkling paper covering the examination table, she closed her eyes, picturing Liu Chishan's face. The memory of his sharp gaze, the way he held himself with an effortless authority, both intimidated and fascinated her. He was a phantom limb, a reminder of a life she could have, a life she was desperately fighting for. The procedure was swift, almost painless, but the emotional ache, the weight of her secret, grew heavier with each passing second. She left the clinic with leaden feet, the bustling city streets a blur of noise and color she couldn't absorb. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was her mother. Sonja, where are you? I've been calling all morning. Mr. Choi is coming for dinner tonight. Be home early. Her mother's voice was sharp, edged with impatience. Sonja's stomach churned. I had an errand to run. Mama, I'll be home soon. She disconnected the call quickly, her hand trembling. The lie tasted like ash in her mouth. Returning to the cramped apartment she shared with her family, Sonja found her mother already bustling around the kitchen, preparing a feast fit for a king. The air was thick with the aroma of roasting meat and simmering spices, a stark contrast to the sterile scent of the clinic. Her mother, her face flushed with exertion, barely glanced at her. Go change, Sonja. Wear that blue dress. The one Mr. Cho likes. Sonja stood frozen, her hand resting on the doorknob to her small, cluttered bedroom. Mama, about Mr. Cho, don't start, Sonja, her mother snapped, turning away from the stove, her eyes blazing. We've been over this marriage is happening. It's the best thing for our family. Think of your brother. Think of your sister. We need this. Sonja flinched. Her family's financial woes were a constant, suffocating presence. But selling herself to a man she barely knew, sacrificing her future for their present, felt like a betrayal of herself. She swallowed, the lump in her throat making it hard to speak. There's something I need to tell you. Before she could utter the words, the front door burst open and her brother, Marco, stumbled in, a frantic look on his face. He was clutching a crumpled piece of paper, his knuckles white. Mama, look what I found. He thrust the paper into his mother's hand. It was the clinic bill, the one Sonja had hastily shoved into her pocket. Her blood ran cold. Her mother's eyes widened, scanning the document, her expression shifting from confusion to disbelief to fury. Sonja, her mother's voice was a low, dangerous growl. What is the meaning of this? Sonja's carefully constructed facade crumbled. She opened her mouth to explain, to defend herself, but the words caught in her throat. The room seemed to shrink, the air thick with unspoken accusations. Her brother stared at her, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion and hurt. Her mother's gaze, however, was like ice. Your brother's name on a bill from a women's clinic. Her voice rose with each word. What have you done? Sonja's world tilted on its axis. The carefully constructed lie, the desperate attempt to carve out a future for herself, had backfired. She had traded one cage for another, one form of betrayal for another, and in the process, she had unwittingly placed herself in a far more precarious position than before. The truth, a tangled mess of desperation and fear, was about to unravel, and she had no idea how to stop it. The sterile white walls of the hospital waiting room seemed to amplify Sonja's racing pulse. The plastic chairs, bolted to the linoleum floor, offered little comfort. Her hands, clammy despite the air conditioning, twisted in her lap. The echoes of her mother's shrill accusations still reverberated in her ears. Accusations of scheming, of trapping a wealthy man, of bringing shame upon their family. But Sonja knew the truth, a truth she was finally ready to reveal. Across from her, the man she knew only as her senior, the one who had accused her of using him, sat silently, his gaze fixed on the floor. He hadn't spoken a word since they had left the doctor's office. The weight of the news, her pregnancy, hanging heavy in the air between them. The harsh fluorescent lighting cast deep shadows under his eyes, accentuating the sharp lines of his jaw. He looked weary, defeated, a far cry from the confident, teasing man she'd met at the university library. Sonja took a deep breath, the antiseptic scent of the hospital stinging her nostrils. I need to tell you something, she began, her voice barely a whisper. He lifted his head, his eyes meeting hers, a flicker of something unreadable in their depths. To know this is going to sound crazy, but crazy is par for the course these days, he said, a hint of bitterness lacing his tone. I know you don't believe me, a boot about not knowing you were that night, she continued, pushing past the lump forming in her throat. But it's true. I would never do something like that. He shifted in his seat, his expression guarded. Then why didn't you say something? Why let me think? Because I was scared, she admitted, her voice cracking. My family were trying to force me into a marriage with a man I didn't love. They saw an opportunity. They pressured me to keep quiet. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring her vision. She blinked rapidly, trying to regain her composure. And the truth is, she continued, her voice gaining strength, to develop feelings for you. Even before that night. In the library, the way you spoke about literature, your passion, it captivated me. And then, afterwards, you knew I was in over my head. But I couldn't bring myself to tell you the truth. I was terrified of losing the only real connection I'd ever felt. He remained silent, his gaze intense, searching. The silence stretched, thick with unspoken emotions. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and husky. "Sanja," he said, his eyes softening. "I owe you an apology." He reached out, his hand hovering hesitantly over hers. "I should have listened to you. I let my pride, my assumptions, cloud my judgment." He paused, taking a deep breath. "The truth is, I felt something too, in the library, and after I tried to convince myself it was just infatuation." But he withdrew his hand, running it through his hair, a gesture of frustration. "My name isn't, it's not what you think." Sanja frowned, confused. "What do you mean?" He looked at her, a strange mixture of apprehension and something else, hope, flickering in his eyes. "My name is Lucician." The name echoed in Sanja's mind, a sudden realization dawning on her. Lucician, the CEO, the man her family had been so desperately trying to ensnare her with, the man she'd unknowingly fallen for. She stared at him, speechless, to pieces of the puzzle finally clicking into place. The expensive car, the tailored suits, the air of authority she'd initially attributed to his senior status, it all made sense now. The weight of this revelation pressed down on her, leaving her breathless. But amidst the shock and confusion, a surge of relief coursed through her veins. He was Lucician, and he had just admitted to feeling something for her. Gathering her courage, she stood up, the plastic chair scraping against the linoleum floor. She walked towards the waiting room doors, her heart pounding in her chest. It was time to confront the real architects of this tangled web of deceit. Her own family. She found her mother pacing anxiously outside the doctor's office, her face etched with worrying. "Sanja, what did the doctor say? Is everything all right?" Sanja stopped before her, her gaze steady. "Mother," she said, her voice clear and strong, "I need to introduce you to someone." She gestured towards Lucician, who had followed her out of the waiting room. He stood beside her, his presence a silent but powerful affirmation of her words. "Mother," Sanja repeated, her voice ringing with newfound confidence. "This is Lucician." Her mother's face paled, her eyes widening in disbelief. The carefully constructed facade of concern crumbled, replaced by a look of stark terror. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. Sanja watched her mother's reaction, a sense of bittersweet triumph washing over her. The years of manipulation, the constant pressure to conform, the web of lies they had woven around her. It was all unraveling before her eyes. She was finally free. The grand ballroom shimmered, her constellation of crystal chandeliers casting a warm glow over the opulent space. Hundreds of guests, a who's who of Shanghai's elite, mingled amidst towering floral arrangements, the air thick with the scent of lilac and champagne. But tonight, even the most dazzling jewels couldn't compete with the radiance emanating from Sanja. She stood at the center of it all, a vision in ivory lace. The gown, a masterpiece of intricate design, flowed around her like liquid moonlight, accentuating her delicate frame. A diamond tiara, a subtle nod to her newfound status, nestled in her upswept hair, catching the light with every turn of her head. Tonight, Sanja wasn't just a struggling young woman burdened by family debts and societal expectations. Tonight, she was Mrs. Lucician. Lucician, resplendent in a tailored tuxedo, stood beside her, his hand clasped firmly in hers. He gazed at her with an intensity that sent a familiar warmth coursing through her veins. It was a look she'd first seen in the crowded elevator, a flicker of something more than just professional courtesy. That initial spark, buried beneath layers of misunderstanding and betrayal, had finally ignited into a flame that now burned bright between them. "You look breathtaking," he murmured, his voice barely audible above the gentle murmur of the crowd. Sonja's heart skipped a beat. She had heard him utter countless compliments since their reconciliation, each one chipping away at the wall she'd built around her heart. But tonight, his words held a different weight, a profound sincerity that resonated deep within her soul. "You clean up pretty well yourself, Mr. Liu," she replied, a playful lilt in her voice, a genuine smile, one that reached her eyes and crinkled the corners, graced her lips. It was a smile Lucian hadn't seen often enough during their tumultuous journey, a smile he now vowed to protect at all costs. The efficient, a distinguished gentleman with a kind face, cleared his throat, signaling the commencement of the formalities. Sonja's gaze met Lucian's, and in that moment, the noise of the ballroom faded away. The world narrowed to just the two of them, their hands intertwined, their hearts beating in unison. The vows they exchanged weren't just recited words. They were promises etched in the depths of their shared experience. Lucian spoke of his initial misjudgment, his regret at the pain he'd caused, and his unwavering commitment to their future. His voice, usually reserved for boardrooms and business deals, trembled with emotion. Sonja, in turn, spoke of her resilience, her forgiveness, and the unexpected love that had blossomed from the ashes of their misunderstandings. Tears welled in her eyes, tears not of sadness or regret, but of overwhelming joy and gratitude. "I do," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I do," Lucian responded, his voice resonating with conviction. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the ballroom erupted in applause. Confetti rained down, creating a shimmering cascade around them. Lucian leaned in, his lips brushing against hers in a tender kiss that sealed their union. It was a kiss that spoke of shared struggles, of forgiveness, and of a love that had defied all odds. As they turned to face their guests, Sonja's gaze fell upon her family. Her mother, her face etched with a mixture of surprise and begrudging acceptance, offered a hesitant smile. Her father, his usual stern demeanor softened, gave a small nod of approval. The weight of their expectations, the pressure of their financial woes, suddenly felt like a distant memory. Lucian had not only won her heart, but had also liberated her from the shackles of her family's ambition. The reception that followed was a blur of laughter, dancing, and heartfelt congratulations. Sonja, no longer the insecure young woman grappling with uncertainty, moved through the crowd with newfound confidence and grace. She was no longer defined by her family's circumstances or the whispers of society. She was Sonja Liu, a woman who had found love and security in the most unexpected of places. Later, as the evening drew to a close, Lucian led her onto the balcony overlooking the city's glittering skyline. The cool night air was a welcome contrast to the warmth of the ballroom. He wrapped his arms around her, pulling her close. "Are you happy, Mrs. Liu?" he asked, his voice a low rumble against her ear. Sonja rested her head against his chest, the steady beat of his heart a comforting rhythm. She looked up at him, her eyes shining with unused tears. "I've never been happier," she whispered, "and it's all thanks to you." He tilted her chin up, his gaze locking with hers. "No, Sonja," he said softly, "it's thanks to us. We faced it all together. And now, we face the future. Together." He leaned in, capturing her lips in a kiss that was both passionate and tender. Beneath the starlit sky, amidst the twinkling lights of Shanghai, Sonja knew she had found more than just a husband. She had found her soulmate, her partner, her protector. She had found her happy ending. The journey had been long and arduous, filled with misunderstandings and betrayals. But in the end, love had prevailed, forging a bond that was stronger and more resilient than anything they could have ever imagined. And as they stood there, embraced in each other's arms, Sonja knew that the future held nothing but promise, a future filled with love, security, and the unwavering support of the man who had stolen her heart and changed her life forever. The Cinderella story, in its modern incarnation, had found its perfect ending. The air in the opulent penthouse suite crackled with tension. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the otherwise sterile air. Oblivious to the emotional storm brewing within, Sonja stood rigidly beside her parents, her hands clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. Across from them, Lucian sat perched on the edge of a sleek, black sofa, his posture radiating an almost predatory calm. The stark white walls, the minimalist decor, the very air itself seemed to amplify the unsettling quiet that preceded the inevitable explosion. Sonja's father, his face flushed with a mixture of anger and avarice, broke the silence. His voice, normally jovial, now dripped with a venomous sweetness. "Mr. Liu, we understand there's been a misunderstanding. Sonja is a young, impressionable girl. She can be overly enthusiastic." He cast a reproving glance at Sonja, who flinched but refused to meet his gaze. "But a promise is a promise," her mother, usually a shadow of her husband, chimed in, her voice sharp and brittle. "And a child, well, a child changes everything. It's only right that you take responsibility." Sonja's stomach churned. The lie hung heavy in the air, a suffocating blanket woven from desperation and greed. The initial shock of her family's betrayal had given way to a dull ache of despair. She'd hoped, foolishly, that Lucian might see through the charade, that he might recognize the fear in her eyes. Instead, his expression remained impassive, a mask of controlled indifference that sent a shiver down her spine. Lucian's gaze swept over Sonja's family, lingering on her for a beat too long. His eyes, dark and inscrutable, betrayed nothing of his thoughts. The silence stretched, each tick of the unseen clock amplifying the tension in the room. Finally, he spoke, his voice smooth as polished obsidian. "Responsibility, you say?" He leaned back, the movement almost languid, and laced his fingers together. "I find it interesting that you come to me with these accusations, these demands, especially considering the circumstances." Sonja's father shifted uneasily. "Circumstances? We're talking about your child, Mr. Liu." A ghost of a smile played on Lucian's lips. "Indeed, but paternity, as I'm sure you're aware, is a complex matter, one that requires proof." He paused, letting the word hang in the air. "I've already taken steps to ascertain the truth." Sonja's heart hammered against her ribs. She knew what he meant. He'd had a paternity test done. The results, which she'd seen just hours ago, confirmed that the child wasn't his. The revelation had been a double-edged sword, bringing relief but also a fresh wave of fear. If Lucian revealed the truth now, her family's carefully constructed lie would crumble, and the consequences would be devastating. Her mother, oblivious to the silent battle raging within Sonja, pressed on. "Mr. Liu, we're not asking for the moon. Just a reasonable settlement, something to secure Sonja and the baby's future." Lucian's eyes narrowed. "Settlement? I believe the term you're looking for is extortion." The word hung in the air, sharp and cold. Sonja's father sputtered, his face turning a mottled shade of purple. "How dare you? We're simply trying to protect our daughter." Lucian rose to his feet, his towering figure casting a shadow over them. "Protect her?" He let out a short, sharp laugh. "You're using her, exploiting her vulnerability for your own financial gain." And you have the audacity to call it protection. He turned to Sunja, his gaze piercing through her. Sunja, he said, his voice softening ever so slightly. I know you're caught in the middle of this. I know you're afraid. He paused, his eyes searching hers. But I also know you're stronger than you think. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, velvet box. He opened it, revealing a stunning diamond ring, its facets catching the light and scattering rainbows across the room. Sunja gasped, her eyes widening in disbelief. He turned back to her parents, his voice hardening once more. I will not be blackmailed. However, he said, his gaze returning to Sunja, I am willing to offer Sunja a different kind of proposal. He extended the box towards her. Marry me, Sunja, not for the sake of the child, but because I see something in you. Something worth fighting for. Sunja's breath caught in her throat. She looked from the ring to Liu Chishen's face, her mind reeling. This wasn't the fairy tale she'd imagined. But in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of her family's deceit, his offer felt like a lifeline, a chance to escape the suffocating web of lies and build a future. Not based on obligation or deception, but on something real, something hopeful. She looked at her parents, their faces contorted in a mixture of shock and fury. Then, she looked back at Liu Chishen, his eyes holding hers with a steady intensity. With a trembling hand, she reached out and took the ring. The penthouse apartment shimmered, a glass and steel palace suspended above the city. The sprawling metropolis glittered below, a tapestry of lights woven against a velvet backdrop of night. Inside, the air vibrated with unspoken words, a delicate tension humming between Sunja and Liu Chishen. The opulent surroundings, usually a symbol of Chishen's power and success, tonight felt secondary, a mere backdrop to the unfolding drama of their lives. Sunja sat on the plush, dove-grey sofa, her posture no longer hesitant, her gaze steady on the man who stood before the panoramic window. Chishen, his usual impeccable suit jacket discarded, looked out at the cityscape, his silhouette a stark contrast against the vibrant lights. The tension wasn't born of animosity, but of anticipation, the pregnant pause before a melody resolves. He turned, a soft smile playing on his lips, and the city lights reflected in his eyes. This, he gestured around, encompassing the lavish apartment. All of this, it means nothing without you. His words, so simple yet profound, resonated within Sunja, a soothing balm on the wounds of the past few tumultuous months. The humiliation of the initial accusations, the crushing weight of her family's betrayal, the fear and the uncertainty of her unexpected pregnancy, they all seemed to fade, eclipsed by the warmth of Chishen's sincerity. I know, she replied, her voice clear and strong, a stark contrast to the timid whispers of the girl he had first met. And I appreciate it, Chishen, but I also want you to know, I don't need it. He crossed the room and sat beside her, the subtle scent of his cologne, a familiar comfort, filling the air. He took her hand, his touch gentle yet firm. I know you don't, Sonja. That's what makes you so different. You didn't come into my life seeking this. He gestured again at their surroundings. You came into my life and inadvertently showed me what truly mattered. Sonja squeezed his hand, a silent acknowledgement of his words. She remembered their first encounter, the awkwardness of their initial conversation, a stark difference in their worlds. She, a struggling student navigating the complexities of life, and he, a powerful CEO accustomed to commanding respect. The memory brought a faint smile to her lips. I never imagined, she confessed, a soft chuckle escaping her lips, that a spilled coffee could lead to this. Chishen laughed, the sound rich and genuine, chasing away the last vestiges of the tension that had hung in the air. Neither did I, but I'm grateful for that spilled coffee, Sonja. It led me to you. A comfortable silence settled between them, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city. Sunja leaned her head against his shoulder, the warmth of his body a comforting presence. The uncertainty of her future, once a looming shadow, had dissipated, replaced by a quiet confidence. She had faced betrayal, weathered storms, and emerged stronger, more resilient than ever. "What about your family?" Chishan asked, breaking the silence. His voice was tinged with concern, a reminder of the challenges they had overcome. Sunja took a deep breath, steeling herself. "I've cut ties. They made their choices, and I've made mine. My priority is my child, and building a future with you." The words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of finality. Chishan tightened his grip on her hand, his silent support speaking volumes. He understood the pain of her decision, the sacrifice it entailed, but he also recognized the strength it took to make it. "I'll support you. Always," he promised, his gaze unwavering. "We'll face whatever comes, together." Sonja lifted her head and looked at him, eyes shining with unused tears. "Thank you, Chishan, for everything." He leaned in, his lips brushing against her forehead in a tender kiss. "There's no need for thanks, Sonja. You've given me more than I could ever repay." He paused, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. "There is one thing, though," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small, velvet box. Sonja's breath caught in her throat as he opened the box, revealing a dazzling diamond ring nestled within. The stone, a brilliant emerald cut, sparkled under the soft light, mirroring the hope and promise that filled the room. "Sonja," Chishan began, his voice thick with emotion, "will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Sonja's face, tears not of sadness, but of overwhelming joy. She had found her happy ending, not in the fairy tale she had once dreamt of, but in a reality far more beautiful and profound. A reality built on mutual respect, unwavering support, and a love that had blossomed amidst adversity. "Yes," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Chishan, I will." He slipped the ring onto her finger, the cool metal a tangible symbol of their commitment. He pulled her close, and their lips met in a kiss that sealed their fate, a promise of a future filled with love, happiness, and the unwavering strength they had found in each other. The city lights twinkled below, witnesses to the beginning of their forever. The opulent ballroom shimmered, a galaxy of chandeliers casting a warm glow on the polished marble floor. Champagne flutes chimed like wind chimes in a gentle breeze, the murmur of conversation a soothing undercurrent to the string quartet's elegant melody. Tonight, the city's elite had gathered for the annual Diamond Gala, a dazzling display of wealth and influence. But tonight, the whispers weren't about the latest stock market fluctuations or political intrigues. They were about Sonja. Sonja, no longer the timid, uncertain young woman Chishan had first encountered in the bustling coffee shop, moved through the crowd with the grace of a seasoned socialite. Her gown, a masterpiece of emerald silk, flowed around her like liquid moonlight, its intricate beadwork catching the light with every graceful turn. A diamond necklace, a dazzling cascade of fire and ice, rested against her throat, a stark contrast to the simple pendant she used to wear. It was the same necklace she'd designed, the one that had sparked Chishan's initial interest, the one that had unwittingly launched this whirlwind journey. Chishan watched her from across the room, his heart a quiet drum against his ribs. He'd seen her transform over these past months, shedding the layers of insecurity and doubt to reveal the strong, resilient woman beneath. The humiliation she'd endured, the betrayal she'd faced, had only served to refine her spirit, polishing it to a brilliant shine. He recalled their first meeting, the clumsy collision that had spilled coffee across his expensive suit. He remembered the sting of his own harsh words, fueled by suspicion and the deep-seated mistrust of opportunistic climbers. He'd been so wrong about her. So incredibly, unforgivably wrong. He pushed through the throng, his gaze locked on hers. As he approached, a faint blush-colored Sonja's cheeks, a flicker of vulnerability in her now confident demeanor. Their eyes met, and the world around them seemed to fade into a soft blur. "You look breathtaking," Chishan murmured, his voice a low rumble in the surrounding hum. Sonja's lips curved into a genuine smile, the kind that reached her eyes and warmed him from the inside out. "Thank you, Chishan. You don't look so bad yourself," he chuckled, the sound rich and deep. "I'm glad you approve. I must admit, I chose this tie with you in mind. It was a deep emerald, perfectly complementing her gown." "A wise choice," she replied, her eyes twinkling with amusement. The music shifted, a waltz replacing the previous melody. Chishan extended his hand. "May I have this dance?" Sonja placed her hand in his, her fingers slender and cool against his palm. As they moved onto the dance floor, the whispers intensified. But Sonja held her head high, her gaze unwavering. She'd earned her place here, not through manipulation or deceit, but through her own talent and resilience. "I never thought I'd see myself here," she confessed, her voice barely audible above the music. "Neither did I," Chishan admitted, his hand tightening around hers. "But I wouldn't have it any other way." They danced, their bodies moving in perfect synchronization, a silent conversation passing between them. He thought back to the accusations, the lies, the attempts by her family to use her as a pawn in their desperate financial gains. He thought of the pregnancy, the fear in her eyes when she'd confided in him, the relief when he'd promised to stand by her side, regardless of the outcome. And he thought of the revelation had turned everything on its head, the discovery that the child wasn't his, but the result of a brief, ill-fated encounter before they'd even met. He'd been tested, his love and trust pushed to their limits, that he'd emerged stronger, his commitment to Sonja solidified by the fires of adversity. He'd proven to himself, and to her, that his feelings were genuine, unburdened by societal expectations or financial considerations. As the music swelled to a crescendo, Chishan leaned down, his lips brushing against her ear. "Sonja," he whispered, his voice thick with emotion, "I love you. I want to spend the rest of my life with you. Marry me." Sonja's breath hitched in her throat. Tears welled in her eyes, blurring the glittering lights of the ballroom. She'd dreamt of this moment, a moment of pure, unadulterated happiness, a moment where the past faded away, replaced by the promise of a future filled with love and security. "Yes," she whispered back, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes. 1,000 times yes." Chishan's face broke into a radiant smile. He stopped dancing, right there in the middle of the ballroom floor, oblivious to the curious stares of the onlookers. He lifted Sonja's hand to his lips, placing a gentle kiss on her fingers. Then, he pulled a small velvet box from his pocket, revealing a stunning diamond ring, its brilliance mirroring the fire in his eyes. The crowd erupted in applause, the whispers turning to murmurs of congratulations. Sonja, tears streaming down her face, nodded, her heart overflowing with joy. As Chishan slipped the ring onto her finger, she knew that this was just the beginning of their story. A story of love, resilience, and the unwavering belief in second chances. A story that had started with a spilled coffee and ended with a promise of forever.